The last box hit the damp concrete sidewalk. "Look at you," my daughter-in-law, Chloe, said, her voice like broken glass. "You look homeless." She was not just talking about the stained clothes I was wearing, she was talking about my entire life. She threw my wedding dress into a mud puddle. My son, Mark, stood leaning against his luxury car, checking his watch. They did not know. They could not know. They thought they were throwing out trash. They did not know they had just lit a fire that would burn their entire artificial world to the ground. My name is Evelyn, and I am 62 years old. I stood frozen on the sidewalk in Summit Creek, watching the last pieces of my life land on the wet pavement. The air was cold, carrying the sharp scent of pine and the metallic smell of last night's rain. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, did not carry the boxes. She threw them, each cardboard container, taped shut by my own hands just 6 months ago, was now garbage to be expelled. She was 35 and vibrated with a hostile energy. Her expensive yoga pants already stained with the grime from my possessions. "This is the last of it," she announced to no one in particular. One box, marked keepsakes, burst open on the curb. She looked at it with pure disgust. My son, Mark, stood just a few feet away, leaning against the polished black metal of his car. At 38, he was a man I barely recognized. His shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the screen of his phone. He did not look at me. He did not look at the scattered contents of my life. He just existed, a passive shadow in his own driveway. Chloe nudged the open box with her foot. "This is ridiculous." She reached down and pulled out a faded cardigan, one my Arthur had loved. "These rags are dirtying up my garage." She tossed it aside. Then she saw the other box, the one I had packed most carefully. With a grunt of effort, she tore the tape off and rummaged inside. Her hand emerged, holding a cloud of ivory satin and lace. My breath caught. It was the last thing I had of him, the last tangible piece of Arthur. "Look at you." "Evelyn?" Chloe said, her voice sharp and cruel, cutting through the quiet morning. "Absolutely homeless." Her words hit me, but I was numb. The shock was a thick blanket, insulating me from the cold, from the reality of the scene. Then she did it. With a careless flick of her wrist, she threw my wedding dress. It landed with a soft, sick splash in a dark puddle of mud by the gutter. I moved then. It was an involuntary reaction, a string pulling my limbs. I stumbled forward and knelt on the cold, gritty concrete. My hands, trembling violently, reached into the filthy water. The satin was heavy, the delicate lace already brown and torn. I clutched it to my chest, the cold mud seeping through my thin sweater. I could feel the grit, the smell of damp earth and decay. It was the smell of humiliation. "Mom, don't make this complicated." Mark's voice. I looked up at him, pleading. He was finally looking, not at me, but at the dress. His face was pale, uncomfortable, but his eyes were hard. "It's just old stuff," he said, his voice flat. He was defending her. "Chloe is just clearing out the space. We need it for the new gym." He was explaining the destruction of my past as if it were a simple scheduling conflict. The gym. A place for Chloe to sweat while I was being erased. Chloe snorted, a sound of pure contempt. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tight roll of cash. She did not hand it to me. She threw it. It landed at my feet, right next to the puddle. A few bills unrolled slightly. $100, she said. Taxi money. Find a cheap motel or something. She turned and walked back toward the house, her ponytail swinging. Don't come back. I stayed there, kneeling on the concrete, clutching the ruined dress. I stared at the money. $100, the price of my banishment. Mark lingered for just a second more. Mum, he started, then stopped. He shook his head, a quick, dismissive gesture. He turned his back on me and followed his wife inside. I heard the low hum of the motor. The heavy, insulated garage door began its descent. It slid down smoothly, a final, grey curtain closing on my life. When it hit the concrete floor, the sound was dull, absolute. It echoed down the empty, perfect street. It sounded like a gunshot. I was alone. I walked for miles. I must have. My feet ached, and my legs felt heavy, but I did not stop until the manicured lawns of Summit Creek had faded into the concrete and neon of the city's edge. Now, I am sitting on a cold, metal park bench. The sun has sunk below the skyline, leaving a deep, bruised purple in its wake. It is getting dark. The plastic bag I found in a trash bin rests on my lap. Inside, my wedding dress is a heavy, sodden lump. The $100 Chloe threw at me is a damp, crumpled wad in my coat pocket. My fingers keep touching it, verifying it is real. $100. The chill seeps through my thin sweater, a deep dampness that sinks into my bones. It is the same kind of cold I felt 6 months ago, the cold that started all of this. Arthur. My Arthur. His death was not gentle. It was a thief, an aneurysm, the doctors said, a word that meant nothing and explained everything. One moment he was at the breakfast table, complaining that I had made the coffee too strong. The next, he was gone. He was 68. The silence he left behind in our home was a physical thing. Our house, the one we had built together, the one where we raised Mark, became a cavern. It was too large, too quiet. Every floorboard creaked with his absence. I would sit in his study for hours, surrounded by his books, and just wait. I was 62 years old and utterly, terrifyingly alone. Then Mark called. His voice, thick with a practiced, filial concern I had not heard in years, felt like a lifeline. "Mum," he said, "you cannot be alone in that big house. It is not healthy. It is too much for you." I clung to the receiver, tears blurring my vision. "I do not know what to do, Mark." "Sell the house," he urged, his voice suddenly practical. "Come live with us. We have a beautiful guest suite in the basement, completely private. You will not have to worry about a thing. We can take care of you. We will be a family again." Family. That one word was all it took. I sold the house in less than a month. I sold the dining table where we had hosted 30 years of Thanksgivings. I sold the worn leather armchair where Arthur used to read. The closing was a blur of signatures. Mark was there, guiding my hand. "Let me invest the proceeds for you, Mum," he said smoothly. "The market is strong. I can make this grow, set you up for good." I trusted him. He was my son. I transferred the majority of the money to an account he controlled. I kept only a small amount for myself, which he insisted was unnecessary. I arrived at their sterile, modern home in Summit Creek with 2 suitcases and my few boxes of keepsakes. Chloe greeted me at the door. She did not hug me. She smiled, a tight, thin-lipped gesture that did not reach her cold eyes. "Welcome, Evelyn," she said. She never called me Mom. Mark bustled me downstairs. "You will love the suite," he said, avoiding my eyes. It was not a suite. It was a windowless room, smelling faintly of damp concrete and paint. A narrow cot was pushed against one wall, and a small, cramped bathroom was attached. It was next to the furnace, which rumbled loudly. "It is very private," Mark said, his voice echoing slightly in the small space. My role was established within 48 hours. I was not a mother, not a guest. I was an unpaid servant. I cooked. They ate food I did not recognize: quinoa, kale, things that tasted like dust. I cleaned their vast, empty-feeling house. Chloe would follow behind me, running a finger along a countertop, checking for dust I had missed. I did their laundry, folding Mark's identical, expensive shirts and Chloe's endless piles of brightly coloured yoga clothes. The criticism was relentless, a steady drip of disdain. I was too slow. I was in the way. I used the wrong detergent. Soon. They stopped speaking to me directly, preferring to talk about me as if I were not there. "Did you tell her we are having guests tonight?" Chloe would ask Mark, as I stood stirring a pot at the stove. "She needs to be finished in the kitchen by 6. "She knows," Mark would mumble, his eyes glued to his phone. He never looked at me. Not once. The boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose heartbreaks I had soothed, was gone. He had been replaced by this hollow, cowardly stranger who flinched whenever his wife spoke. I knew it was over last week. I was folding towels in the hallway upstairs when I heard their voices, sharp and clear, from their bedroom. "We need that space, Mark," Chloe said. "I am not having my clients for the new gym traipse past her little dungeon to get downstairs." "Where will she go?" "Chloe." Mark's voice was weak, a pathetic defense. "I do not care. A motel, a home, whatever. She is taking up room, and frankly, she is depressing to look at. You promised you would handle it. Handle it." There was a long silence. I stood frozen, a towel clutched in my hands. "Fine," Mark finally said, his voice resigned. "I will handle it." This was him handling it. A cold drop of water hit my cheek, and I flinched. I looked up. It was not a tear. The bruised purple sky had finally broken. A cold, steady rain began to fall, slicking the dark wood of the bench and drumming against the plastic bag on my lap. I was back. Here. On this bench, with $100 and a ruined dress. As the city lights blurred around me, the rain forced me to move. It was no longer a drizzle, but a cold, driving assault. I could not stay on the bench. I pulled the plastic bag with my dress closer and started walking. My destination, a flashing red vacancy sign I had seen blocks away. The motel lobby smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. A man with dead eyes sat behind a thick pane of glass. "I need a room," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy. He looked me up and down, my damp clothes, my hair plastered to my head, the muddy plastic bag. "Nightly rate is $89, plus a $100 cash deposit." My heart sank. "I only have 100. Total, can't you just—" "No deposit, no room," he said, turning his attention back to a small, flickering television. "Policy." I was back on the street. The rain had not let up. I had $89 for a room I could not have. I had $11 left over from Chloe's insult. That was it. I found the bus terminal. It was open all night. The waiting area was vast, cold, and lit by buzzing fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. I found a hard plastic chair in a corner, put the plastic bag between my feet, and wrapped my arms around myself, trying to look like I was waiting for a bus that was just delayed. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made me jump. The shuffle of footsteps, a sudden cough, a man who yelled in his sleep 3 rows over. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision, and every one of them was a threat. I am a 62-year-old woman, alone, with nowhere to go. I was prey. I clutched my thin coat tighter, the dampness from the dress seeping into my legs. I just had to make it until morning. When the first grey light of dawn filtered through the dirty windows, I felt a stiff, agonizing ache in my neck and back. Worse than the pain was the hunger. It was a hollow, demanding emptiness that felt like another layer of humiliation. I found a convenience store. The bright lights and colourful packaging felt like an assault. I bought a cup of black coffee and a dry-looking Danish. It cost almost $4. I paid with the crumpled bills from my pocket, avoiding the cashier's eyes. I ate it on the sidewalk outside, greedily, like an animal. The hot, bitter coffee burned my throat, but did nothing to warm the chill deep inside me. I had to call Mark. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. He would answer, horrified, and come get me. I found a payphone, the receiver cold and smelling of stale alcohol. I fed it my coins and dialed the number I knew by heart. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then clicked. You have reached Mark Vance. I am unavailable right now. Please leave a message. His voice, so calm, so professional. Mark, I said, my voice cracking. Mark, it is Mom. Please pick up. Chloe. She threw me out. I do not have anywhere to go. I am in the city. Please call me. I did not have a number to leave. I will call back. I hung up, the panic rising in my throat like bile. I wandered for hours. The city was waking up. People rushing to jobs I no longer had a connection to. The hunger came back, sharp and painful. I saw a line of people snaking out from a church basement. A sign read, St. Jude's Soup Kitchen. Lunch, 11:30 a.m. It was 11:45. My stomach cramped. I got in line. The shame was a physical weight. I kept my head down, staring at my worn shoes. These were people with nowhere else to go. I was one of them. Mrs. Vance. The voice was clean, familiar, from another life. I looked up, startled. A man in a crisp suit was standing a few feet away, his face a mask of confusion and shock. It was David Allen, a senior engineer from Etherlogics, Arthur's colleague, Arthur's friend. I wanted to run, to disappear into the concrete. My face burned hot. David, I managed to say, my God, Evelyn, is that you? He looked at my clothes, my hair, the line I was standing in. What happened? Are you all right? The lie came instantly, born of pure primal shame. I was mugged, I whispered, clutching my plastic bag. Last night, they took my purse, my phone, everything. I am just trying to get to the police station. He looked unconvinced. His eyes flickered with pity. Mugged Evelyn. My office is just around the corner. Come with me. We can call the police. Call Mark. No, I said, too quickly. No, I just need to. I am fine. Really. He knew I was lying. The pity in his eyes deepened, and it was worse than Chloe's contempt. He reached into his wallet. "Here," he said, pressing 2 bills into my hand. "It is just $20. Please, take it." He then pulled out a business card. "That is my direct line. If you need anything at all, Evelyn, please call me." I nodded, unable to speak, and pocketed the money and the card. He hesitated, then turned and walked away quickly, as if fleeing the scene of an accident. I left the line. I could not eat there now. The sun was setting again. Another night was coming. I had a little over $30. The encounter with David had shattered my last bit of denial. Mark was not coming. I used the last of my money, including David's $20, to pay for a cot at a women's shelter. The room smelled of disinfectant and despair. It was filled with bunk beds, each one occupied. The only sounds were quiet weeping and the rustle of bodies turning on thin mattresses. I lay down, fully clothed, and stared at the metal springs of the bunk above me. This was it. This was the bottom. I had failed. In the shelter, sleep was not rest. It was a shallow, fitful state, punctuated by the coughing of the woman in the bunk below me and the metallic clang of the radiator. But in that forced stillness, with nothing left to do but survive, my mind, for the first time in months, cleared. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was not just grieving, I was thinking. I thought about Arthur. I thought about his quiet, meticulous nature. He was a man who labelled everything, who backed up his files 3 times, a man who hated loose ends. And then it hit me. A memory, emerging like a ship from a dense fog. It was years ago, maybe 10, on our anniversary. Arthur had slipped a small, single key into my hand. It was not for the house or the car. "This is for the bank, Evie," he had said, his eyes serious but kind. "It is a safe deposit box. It is in your name. Only your name." I had laughed. "What is in it? Secret treasure." His smile was faint. "You could call it that. It is the backup plan for the backup plan." He closed my fingers over the key. "Put this somewhere no one else would look. Not even Mark. I hope you never need it. A backup plan for the backup plan." I sat bolt upright on the cot, my heart hammering. The key. I had not thought of it since. I had put it, as he suggested, somewhere secret. My old wallet. It was still in my coat pocket. The one Chloe had not bothered to go through because it held nothing but old loyalty cards and a few expired photos. My hand fumbled inside, past the useless plastic, to a small tear in the lining I had never bothered to fix. My fingers slipped behind the fabric, and I felt it. Cold, small, and metal. I had a purpose. I left the shelter as soon as the doors opened at 6 a.m. I had no money for a bus. The bank, the main branch, was downtown. It was miles away. I walked. The entire day was a pilgrimage. I walked past shops opening, past commuters with their coffee cups, past people who looked at me and then quickly looked away. I was invisible, a ghost in dirty clothes, but I did not care. My feet blistered, my legs burned, but I kept moving. The key in my pocket was a heavy, solid weight, pulling me forward. It was almost 4 in the afternoon when I finally stood in front of the bank. It was a temple of glass and granite, cold and imposing. I walked in. The change in atmosphere was instant. The air was warm, hushed, and smelled of money and polish. Everyone was dressed in sharp suits. I was a stain on their marble floor. My shoes were caked in mud. My hair was matted, and I was sure I smelled of the shelter. A young woman at a polished desk looked up, her professional smile faltering as she took in my appearance. "Can I help you, madam?" Her voice was tight with distaste. "I need to access my safe deposit box," I said. My voice was hoarse. She hesitated, her eyes scanning me with suspicion. "Do you have your key?" I placed the small, tarnished key on her desk. Her eyes widened slightly. I then reached into my inner pocket and pulled out the one thing Chloe had not been able to take, my passport. I had kept it with me ever since Arthur died, just in case. "My identification," I said. The woman picked up the passport, opening it to my photo. She stared at the picture, then at my face. The woman in the photo was smiling, her hair neat, her eyes bright. The woman in front of her was a wreck. She looked from the photo to me several times. "One moment. Mrs. Vance," she said, her tone suddenly shifting to a strained, corporate politeness. She picked up her phone. I waited, my anxiety churning. I was terrified she would call security, that she would tell me my passport was a fake, that I was an imposter. But she returned with a male employee, an older manager. He smiled kindly. "Mrs. Vance. This way, please." He led me through a heavy, circular steel door and into the vault. The air was cold and still. He pointed to a wall of small, metal drawers. "We will need your key, please." I gave it to him. He inserted it along with his own. He turned his key, then stepped back. "It is all yours." He left, closing the heavy door behind me, leaving me in a small, private viewing booth. I sat down. The box was in front of me. It was long and flat. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. I pulled the metal drawer open. It was not what I expected. There was no cash, no jewelry, no gold bars. Instead, the box contained 3 items: a small, black, rugged-looking laptop, the kind the military might use, a single, silver USB drive, and resting on top, a thick, cream-coloured envelope. My name was written on it in Arthur's familiar, precise script. Evie. My fingers trembled as I tore the seal. Inside was a single, folded sheet of paper. Evie. My dearest Evie, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are in trouble. I am so sorry. I hoped this day would never come. I must be brief. You cannot trust Mark. I watched Chloe change him. I saw how he bent to her will, how his greed started to overshadow his kindness. I tried to protect our assets, but I was worried he would find a way to contest the will, to get you to sign things you did not understand. So, I created this. This is your protection. Do not trust Mark. Do not trust Ether Logics. The laptop is your leverage. The password is our anniversary, the one we always forgot, written backwards. The date, the month, the year. I love you. I always loved you. Be strong. Evie, you were always the strong one. Arthur. I left the bank, the heavy laptop in the plastic bag alongside the ruined dress. The weight was comforting, real. I walked, not aimlessly, but with a new, cold clarity. I needed a computer, and I needed privacy. The public library, a large, quiet building of brick and glass, offered both. I found a remote carrel in the back, on the 3rd floor, hidden behind stacks of periodicals. My hands were still dirty. I looked like a vagrant, and a few people gave me wide berth. their expressions a mixture of pity and distaste. I did not care. I sat down, placed the rugged laptop on the desk, and opened it. The screen flickered to life, showing only a black screen with a single prompt, password. I pulled Arthur's letter from my pocket. My hands were shaking again. But this time, it was not from fear. It was anticipation. Our anniversary, the one we always forgot, written backwards. The date, the month, the year. October 25th, 1980, 10/25, 1980, 10/251980. Backwards, 089152001. I typed the numbers. 089152001. I hit enter. The screen flashed, and a desktop appeared. It was not cluttered. It was organized, just like Arthur. There were folders labeled Contracts, Patents, Source Code, and Correspondence, and a single text file named Read Me First. I clicked it. It was another letter from Arthur, this one more technical. Evie, here are the facts. I was never a salaried employee at EtherLogics. I was a contractor. They hired me in the beginning to build their core AI platform. They were a startup with no money, so I agreed to a licensing deal. They paid me a fee, and I retained ownership of the underlying architecture. They were, in effect, renting my mind. I read it again, renting his mind. They grew. They got arrogant 3 years ago. They breached the contract. They altered the source code without my authorization, integrated it into new products, and filed patents under their own name, claiming my work as their intellectual property. They knew it was fraud. They were betting I would never find out, or that I would be too tired to fight. He was not too tired. The folders were a testament to his methodical preparation for war. I opened the patents folder. Inside were the original, time-stamped filings, all registered to a corporate entity I had never heard of, Vance Arthur Innovative Solutions. V-I-S. I clicked on the contracts folder. I found the V-A-I-S incorporation documents. My breath hitched. He had filed them over 15 years ago. I scanned the lines, looking for names, for partners. There was only one name, mine. Beneficiary and sole proprietor Evelyn Vance. I read the line over and over. Sole proprietor. Arthur had built a fortress and put me on the throne, and I never even knew it existed. EtherLogics, the tech giant of Colorado, the source of Mark's prestige and Chloe's wealth, was not their company. It was a house of cards built on a foundation that I, Evelyn Vance, owned outright. My son, the executive vice president, my daughter-in-law, the chief marketing officer, their entire careers, their 6-figure salaries, their luxury car, their house at Summit Creek, all of it was derived from technology they did not own, technology they had, in fact, stolen from me. Then I saw the USB drive, still sitting on the desk beside the laptop. I looked at the Read Me First file again. The USB drive is the key. Evie, literally. I built a back door into the platform, a master authorization key only I knew. If they ever locked me out, I could lock them out. If you plug that drive into this laptop and run the program named Initiate, it will send an encrypted packet to the EtherLogics main servers. It will revoke their license key. It will not destroy data, but it will shut down everything. Every platform, every client portal, every internal system. It will turn EtherLogics dark in less than 60 seconds. It is the leverage you need. I looked at the silver drive, the kill switch. I sat back in the hard, wooden library chair. the smell of old paper and floor polish filling my lungs. The woman who had been weeping in a shelter last night, the woman who had knelt in a mud puddle, was gone. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen. My face was streaked with dirt. My hair was a mess. Chloe was right. I looked homeless. But I was not. I was the owner. My first instinct was not to use the kill switch. That was an execution. I was not ready for that. I was ready for an alliance. I packed up the laptop and walked out of the library, leaving the muddy dress in the trash can. I did not need it anymore. I kept the passport and the key. I walked to the payphone at the corner, the one I had used to call Mark. This time, I had a different call to make. Arthur's laptop had another file, Competitors. The top of the list was Omnicorp, a massive tech conglomerate based on the West Coast, Etherlogix's most aggressive rival. Arthur had included a name and a direct, private number for their chief counsel. I did not call David Allen. I did not call a local lawyer. I dialed the number for Omnicorp. A clipped, professional voice answered. Legal department. I spoke the words from Arthur's memo, a script he had prepared for this exact moment. My voice was steady, cold, and clear. My name is Evelyn Vance. I am the sole owner of the VAIS source code. Etherlogix is currently operating on a fraudulent and expired license. I want to speak to your head of acquisitions and your chief counsel immediately. There was a half-second of silence. Who did you say you were? Evelyn Vance, the owner of the IP your competitor has been stealing for 3 years. Stay on the line, the voice said. I waited. It was less than 30 seconds. A new voice, deep and sharp, came on. This is Harrison. Who am I speaking with? I repeated my statement. Where are you, Mrs. Vance? He asked. A payphone in downtown Colorado, I said. Do not move, he said. A black sedan will be at the main public library on 8th Street in 1 hour. Give them your name. They will bring you to us. The line clicked dead. In 55 minutes, a gleaming black car pulled up to the curb where I was waiting. A driver in a suit got out. Mrs. Vance. Yes. He opened the door. We have a jet waiting. By midnight, I was in a 5-star hotel suite in San Francisco. It was larger than the entire downstairs of Mark and Chloe's house. A selection of clothes, in my size, was already hanging in the closet. Toiletries, expensive ones, lined the marble bathroom counter. The next morning, I was not a homeless woman. I was a client. I was an asset. I was met by a team of 3 lawyers from Omnicorp, led by Harrison. They were polite, ruthless, and efficient. First, Harrison said, sliding a folder toward me. Let's fix this. The folder contained a power of attorney. This is what you signed when you moved in with your son. It gave him broad access to your finances. I nodded, my stomach tightening. He used it, Harrison said, his face impassive. 3 months ago, he borrowed $750,000 from a trust Arthur Vance set up for you. A trust you were apparently never informed of. He used that money to buy Etherlogix stock options, a clear case of insider trading based on information we now know he did not own. $750,000. I felt dizzy. It was blatant. Criminal fraud. So, Mark is compromised. Harrison continued. Chloe, his wife, has been expensing personal luxuries as marketing costs for 2 years. They are both liabilities. Etherlogix is vulnerable. And you, Mrs. Vance, hold the knife. I spent the next 3 days in that conference room. I did not sleep. I drank black coffee, and I read every line of Arthur's original contract. I read Omnicorp's analysis. I learned about licensing, about intellectual property, about corporate governance. The woman who did laundry and was afraid of the dark at a bus stop was gone. She had been burned away. On the 3rd day, I had my hair cut. I did not ask for a simple trim. I had it cut into a sharp, stylish bob that framed my face. I bought 3 outfits, a navy blue power suit, a charcoal grey dress, and a pair of severe, elegant black trousers. I looked in the mirror. I did not see Evelyn, the widow. I saw Mrs. Vance, the proprietor. So, we have 2 options, Harrison said, steepling his fingers. Option 1, we help you activate the kill switch. Etherlogics goes dark. The resulting chaos allows us to absorb their panicked clients for pennies on the dollar. You become very, very rich. But it is messy. Option 2, he continued. You sell VAIS to us. Right here. Right now. We will give you an 8-figure sum, and we will handle the subsequent hostile takeover of Etherlogics ourselves. It is clean. You walk away. I looked at the 2 options on the whiteboard, an execution or an abdication. I chose a third. I do not want to sell it, I said. My voice was new, tempered by the last 3 days. It did not tremble. And I do not want to shut it down. Not yet. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Arthur's work is in that company, I said. And my money, my son's fraud is in that company. I want control. A slow smile spread across Harrison's face. Control? I like that. I want you to represent me, but as my counsel, not as my buyer. I said, I want you to arrange a meeting at the Etherlogics headquarters. I want the entire executive board, including my son and my daughter-in-law. And who should we say is calling the meeting? He asked. Tell them, I said, that a representative from Vance Arthur Innovative Solutions will be there to discuss the terms of their immediate cessation of operations. The Etherlogics boardroom was silent, the air thick with the expensive, suffocating tension of men who were used to winning, but were now bracing for a loss. The executive team, 10 men and 2 women, sat around the polished mahogany table, their postures rigid. They had all seen the cease and desist letter. It had come from Omnicorp's legal department on behalf of an unknown entity called VAIS, and it had shut down their impending IPO. Mark was there. He sat halfway down the table, his face a pale, greenish white. He had not slept. He had seen the VAIS name in Arthur's old files he had only glanced at when he was liquidating his father's assets. He was terrified. He was fiddling with his pen, a repetitive, sharp click that was the only sound in the room. Chloe sat beside him, a stark contrast. She looked annoyed, as if the entire proceeding was an interruption of her schedule. She tapped at her phone under the table, her expression one of pure impatience. She assumed this was a dry, boring, legal squabble. The main doors of the boardroom opened. Everyone's head snapped up. Richard Sterling, the CEO of Etherlogics, walked in. He was a tall man, always impeccably dressed, and he looked strangely calm. He walked to his chair at the head of the table. "Thank you for waiting," he said, his voice smooth. They were expecting a legal team from San Francisco. They were expecting a fight. Sterling looked at the door. The representative from VAIS is here. The doors opened again. I walked in. I was wearing the navy blue suit. My hair was perfect. My heels made a sharp, distinct sound on the marble floor. I was flanked by two men from Harrison's team, their faces impassive, carrying identical briefcases. I did not look at Mark. I did not look at Chloe. I kept my eyes on Richard Sterling, but I could feel their stares. I could feel the sudden, complete cessation of all movement. The air in the room did not just get tense. It froze. I heard a sharp gasp. It was Chloe. Mark made a small, choking sound, as if he had been punched in the stomach. I saw him from the corner of my eye. All the colour had drained from his face. He looked like he was seeing a ghost who had just materialized in $1,000 suit. Chloe's face was a rapid, horrifying kaleidoscope of emotions first. Annoyance. What is she doing here? Then utter confusion. Then a dawning, sickening understanding that turned her knuckles white. I ignored them both. I walked the length of the room, past the stunned faces of the other executives, until I reached the head of the table, opposite the CEO. I placed my new leather briefcase on the polished wood with a soft, definitive sound. I looked at the assembled board. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said. My voice was cold, clear, and carried to every corner of the room. It was not the voice of a housemaid. It was the voice of an owner. "I am Evelyn Vance, sole proprietor of Vance Arthur Innovative Solutions." I paused, letting the name settle. "And therefore, I am the owner of every single line of code that is currently keeping this company, and your stock options, alive." A murmur of shock went around the table. An executive started to speak. "What is the meaning?" "Richard," I said, cutting him off. My gaze fixed on the CEO, Richard Sterling, who had spent the last 48 hours in frantic negotiations with my lawyers, stood up. He had chosen survival. "And we at Ether Logics," he announced, his voice projecting a forced but plausible enthusiasm, "are delighted to announce that we have just finalized a new, long-term licensing agreement with VAIS." The board looked stunned. Mark looked like he was going to vomit. "And as a crucial part of that new partnership," Sterling continued, "we are honored to welcome Mrs. Vance to our board of directors, effective immediately." He gestured to the empty chair at his right hand, the seat of power. I gave Richard a small, thin smile, a smile of mutual understanding. Then, and only then, did I turn my head. I let my gaze travel down the table and land, for the first time, on my son. He was shaking. Chloe was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "I believe," I said, my voice quiet but carrying, "that we have a great deal to discuss." I locked eyes with Mark, particularly the financial shortfalls and the $750,000 discrepancy in your department. "Mark, my first act as a board member was not to celebrate. It was to work. My second act was to call for a motion. Given the discrepancies we have recently discovered," I said to the assembled board, my voice echoing in the suddenly very quiet room, "I move for an immediate, comprehensive, and external audit of the last 5 years of financials." It was not a request. It was a demand, backed by the implied threat of the kill switch. The motion passed unanimously. I did not fire them. Firing is a release. It is an end. I wanted something far more thorough. I wanted a dissection. The auditors I brought in, courtesy of Omnicorp's recommendations, were not gentle. They were sharks, and they found blood in the water within 24 hours. Mark's $750,000 loan from my trust was the first thing to surface. It was a clear, unambiguous case of felony fraud and embezzlement. Chloe's downfall followed a day later. The audit of the marketing department, an area she ran like her personal fiefdom, was a masterpiece of petty theft. Thousands of dollars disguised as event costs were, in fact, receipts from luxury boutiques. Client dinners were spa weekends. Vendor outreach was a first-class ticket to Cabo. I did not fire them. Instead, I had them suspended, pending the results of a full criminal investigation. The internal memo read. That was the key phrase. The moment the word criminal was attached to their names, the walls began to close in. I made a phone call to the bank that held the mortgage on their Summit Creek house, a bank that had a significant commercial relationship with Etherlogics. I merely expressed the board's deep concern over the financial irregularities tied to the signatories of that loan. The bank did not need to be told twice. With their assets frozen and their salaries suspended, Mark and Chloe missed their next mortgage payment. The bank, citing the high-risk nature of the loan holders, activated the acceleration clause. The entire balance was due immediately. They could not pay. Within 1 week, a foreclosure notice was nailed to their front door. The house they had thrown me out of was no longer theirs. Their corporate credit cards were, of course, locked. Their personal cards, which were tied to the same assets now frozen by the bank, were declined. They were forced to move. They were pariahs. But I was not finished. Mark, I knew, would try to find another job. He was well connected in the industry. I had to sever those connections. I drafted a new internal memo, this one on behalf of the Etherlogics board, and I sent it to the entire company. It was a long, dry document about the new era of financial integrity and corporate responsibility we were entering. And in the third paragraph, I made an example. We must learn from the oversight failures of the past, I wrote. The kind of lax managerial supervision that allowed the financial misconduct in Mr. Vance's department to go unnoticed for so long will no longer be tolerated. I did not accuse him of the crime. I accused him of being a bad manager, of being asleep at the wheel. It was a more insidious, more professional kind of shiv. I knew the memo would be leaked to every tech journal and headhunter in the state within an hour. And it was. Mark was no longer just a potential criminal. He was incompetent. He was unemployable. He was blacklisted. They were broke. They were toxic. I heard from one of the executives that Mark had been forced to sell his luxury car, not to a dealer, but in a private, cash-only sale, for far less than it was worth. They took that money, the last of their money, and rented a small, one-bedroom apartment in a run-down complex on the bad side of the city. The kind of place where you pay for the month in cash because no one runs a credit check. They had gone from a Summit Creek mansion to a slum, all in less than 2 weeks. And I was just getting started. I had moved into the corner office, the one that, 2 weeks ago, had belonged to Mark. It was 4 times the size of my basement room, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. I was reviewing the preliminary audit reports when my new assistant buzzed. Mrs. Vance. Her voice was hesitant. There is a couple down in the lobby, a Mark and Chloe Vance. They are demanding to see you. They claim it is a family matter. My first instinct was to have them thrown out. But no, I had been waiting for this. It is quite all right, Sarah, I said, my voice smooth. Send them up. I did not stand. I did not move. I simply waited. When the door opened, I did not look up immediately. I let them stand there for a full 5 seconds, soaking in the atmosphere of their own humiliation. When I finally did raise my eyes, the sight was satisfying. They were a complete disaster. Mark was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt that looked like it had been slept in. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with red. He had lost visible weight. Chloe was worse. She, who had never been seen without a perfect face of makeup and hair, was barefaced. Her skin was sallow, her eyes puffy from days of crying. Her expensive clothes were creased, her hair pulled back in a messy, greasy knot. They looked, in a word, homeless. They just stood there, just inside the door, as if unsure whether they were allowed to step on the plush carpet. Finally, Mark took a shuffling step forward, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Mom!" His voice cracked. It was a pathetic, small sound. "Please," he said, and the tears came instantly, streaming down his pale cheeks. "Mum, please. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake." He was sobbing. A full-body, gasping cry. Chloe, surprisingly, was the one who moved. She rushed forward, not toward me, but to the space in front of my desk. And then she dropped to her knees. She actually, literally, fell to her knees on my carpet. "Mrs. Vance," she choked out. Her head bowed. "Evelyn, please, you have to stop this. They are talking about prosecution. The D.'s office. We will lose everything. Everything." I watched them. He, the weeping child, and she, the prostrate beggar. This was the woman who had thrown my wedding dress in the mud. This was the man who had checked his watch while it happened. I did not speak. I slowly reached for the glass of sparkling water on my desk. I took a small, deliberate sip. The cool bubbles were refreshing. I set the glass down. The sound a small, sharp click in the quiet room. "Everything?" I asked, my voice genuinely curious. I tilted my head. "You mean the rags?" Chloe's head snapped up. Her face was a mess of confusion and rage. Mark just cried harder, his sobs turning into a desperate wail. "It was her," he suddenly screamed, pointing a shaking finger at his wife, who was still on the floor. "It was all Chloe. She made me. She said you were depressing, that you were in the way. I never wanted you to go. Mum, I never did." It was as if a switch had been flipped. Chloe's face, which had been pleading, contorted into a mask of pure, reptilian hatred. She scrambled to her feet, her voice a raw shriek that echoed off the glass walls. "You coward! You absolute, pathetic coward!" She turned on him, striking his chest with her fists. "You were the one. Just get it done. Chloe. You said I am sick of her being here. You said you were the one who took her money." "I took it for us," he howled back, pushing her away. "You took it for you," she screamed. They were tearing each other apart. Right here, in my new office. Accusations and insults flew. He called her a thief. She called him a fraud. They ripped open every lie they had ever told each other, every resentment they had ever hidden. And I just sat there. I watched. My face was serene, impassive. I felt nothing, No anger, no pity, no pain. It was like watching a documentary about two vicious, feral animals trapped in a cage of their own making. I did not have to lift a finger. They were more than happy to destroy each other for me. That is enough. My voice was not loud. It did not have to be. It cut through their pathetic, screeching insults like a blade. They both stopped, their mouths open, their faces red and blotched. The heavy, expensive silence of the office rushed back in, amplifying the sound of their harsh, ragged breathing. I stood up, the leather of my chair making a soft, sighing sound. I did not look at them. I walked away from my desk, my heels sinking into the carpet, until I reached the vast expanse of glass. The city was laid out before me, a kingdom of steel and light glittering in the afternoon sun. I had walked these streets as a ghost only days ago. Now, I saw them for what they were, a new foundation. I spoke to the glass, my reflection staring back at me, calm and severe. "Mark," I said. My voice was even, conversational, as if I were remarking on the weather. "You stole your father's money. You watched your mother be thrown onto the street, and you checked your watch. You are no longer my son." I heard a sound behind me, a choked, wet gasp. It was a sound of complete and total breakage. I did not turn. "Chloe," I continued, still looking out the window. "You were right about one thing." I turned, slowly. I walked back and stood behind my desk, a fortress of polished wood separating me from them. I looked directly into her swollen, terrified eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, animal panic. "I did look homeless," I said. "You were very accurate." I let the words hang in the air. I let her see the complete absence of emotion on my face. There was no anger. There was no pain. There was only the cold, hard fact of my victory and her ruin. My hand moved to the intercom on my desk. I pressed the small, black button. "Sarah," I said, "please send security to my office." "Yes, Mrs. Vance," her voice replied instantly, crisp and professional. Mark slid to the floor, his legs giving out. He was a heap of mismatched, dirty clothes, weeping into his hands. Chloe just stood there, frozen, her entire body trembling. It took less than 30 seconds. The door opened, and two uniformed security officers stepped inside. They were large, impassive men. They looked at me, and only at me, awaiting orders. "Mrs. Vance," the lead one asked. I pointed, a simple, declarative gesture, toward the two people who had once been my family. "These individuals are trespassing," I said, my voice clear and final. "They do not have an appointment. They do not have jobs here. They do not have a house. They have nothing." The guards moved instantly, one for each of them. The screaming started then. Mark wailed, a high-pitched, childish sound. "No, Mom, no, please, please. I am sorry. Mom." Chloe was a different kind of animal. She cursed, she spat, she tried to fight, her nails raking at the guard who held her arm in a firm, unbreakable grip. "You old witch!" she shrieked at me. "You will not get away with this. You are nothing. You are still nothing." They were dragged out. Their shouts echoed down the carpeted hallway, a fading, desperate sound of their own undoing. "No. Please, no." The door to my office clicked shut, cutting off the last of the noise. The silence returned, deeper and more perfect than before. I sat down in my chair. I was alone. My eyes fell on an object in the corner of my desk. It had been the first thing I had commissioned when I took control. It was my wedding dress. The fabric, once stained with mud and gutter water, was now pristine, restored by the best textile conservationists in the state. It was not in a box. It was pressed, perfect, and sealed behind glass in a deep, professional frame, a piece of modern art, a monument to survival. I looked at the lace Arthur had touched. I looked at the satin Chloe had tried to destroy. I did not smile. Justice was not about joy. It was about balance. The scales, at last, were level. I picked up my pen and turned back to the audit report on my screen. I had work to do. Thank you all. Thank you all for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. Share your thoughts. Subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and give it that hype button to help more people hear this.